that both industries, both the petrochemical industry and the cancer industry, are in fact owned, monopolized into a massive cartel by a select few elite families. Let's begin and look at where did the establishment, the modern cancer establishment of cancer therapy actually begin. I would submit that to understand the game, one must understand the playing field, understand the rules of the game, the strategy. The history of the game is very, very important to understand. And most importantly, we need to identify and have biographies on the very players themselves if we're going to effectively win this game. In the area of health and wellness, the general public has unfortunately become mere pawns in the hands of these ruling elite. The question we're going to answer tonight is simply, who are the, quote, ruling elite of the health maintenance arena, and what are their origins, and more importantly, what are their bloodlines? We're going to answer the question, who are they? Folks, the story needs to begin in the dusty pages of history books. If most of you that listen to this have gone through the American, again, Board of Region controlled history of the world, most people will not understand that all this began in something called the 30 Years' War in the year 1618. This is an actual map of Europe from 800 AD to the year 1600 AD. You have basically the United Kingdom as it still is today, Scandinavia, pretty much the same way. We have Eastern Europe, Russia, the Balkans, down here in the corner is the boot of Italy, and here in the central part of what is now known as Germany and Austria, Poland, Czechoslovakia, etc. That was actually in 1618 what's called the Holy Roman Empire. I refer to it instead as the Unholy Roman Empire. I'll explain to you why I say this. And down in the corner of this, you see Iberia, which is modern-day Spain, and of course, France. The 30 Years' War was fought between the years 1618 to 1648. It was fought between the Vatican of Italy and Protestant reformers. It was very much a war over basic religious ideologies and freedoms. It was instigated because of the Vatican Jesuits, who promoted what is called pharmacopoeia, or in other words, sorcery, and the related dictatorship that came from it. The protesters who wanted freedom from this oppression, from this darkness, they wanted freedom from what was called the papal yoke. And it was a 30-year conflict. Many, many people died. The Unholy Roman Empire was, in fact, a confederation of states that included modern-day Austria, Burgundy, Germany, Lombardy, which is again northern Italy, and parts of modern-day France. The founder of the Unholy Roman Empire was a man called Charles the Great, also known as Charlemagne. He was crowned emperor of this unholy empire by the Roman Pope on Christmas Day in the year 800 AD. What really brought the Jesuit order what brought this all to a climax in this area of the world was his original book of sorcery, or in Latin the word pharmacopoeia, by a Jesuit priest named Del Rio. You'll notice here on the opening page of this book, in the early 1600s, the Jesuit seal, IHS, you saw that on Mr. Huntsman's logo in the Huntsman Cancer Institute, under this sign, conquer. And that is, again, what it has never really changed, this whole battle for pharmacopoeia versus natural healing has never really changed. Again, my training came from an underground source of information in Germany. The Kneippel Institute is trying to keep the principles that were fought for during the war of the 30-year war intact. And this is much of what I've learned in my studies there is brought out here in this presentation. Del Rio's handbook outlined the Vatican's vision of the future and the future world of medicine. Again, this is one of the two best-known 16th century treatises on magic and magical healing. It's also called Desquisitionum Magicarium Libri Sex. It was first printed in 1599 and is the magnum opus of Martin Del Rio, a Jesuit priest, and yes, folks, a professed Satanist. The book included specific amulets, incantations, symbolisms, conjuring, controlling spells, spirits, alchemy, prophecy, divination, and many other topics. And this was designed to be practiced by the Jesuit order of the Vatican, the Jesuit healers in their robes, their black robes, controlled by the Vatican. Folks, this is the origin of the medical term practice. Have you ever wondered why it is a doctor practices but never perfects? This is the origin of the term practice. Well, the war ended with the so-called Treaty of Westphalia in the year 1648. At that time, after 30 years of massive warfare, there was really nothing left to fight over. Europe was in ruins. France became the Second World Empire in 1648. They emerged the clear winner of this war. The unholy empire and the influence of the Vatican was greatly weakened when France entered the conflict. And to this day, the year 2006, the Vatican still holds France responsible. The map of Europe at that time was drawn after the war, has pretty much still continued unchanged unto this very day. This is what Hitler was all about, folks. This is what the Third Reich was all about, to bring and unite the same block of land that Charlemagne had established in 800 AD through the Vatican. Hitler wanted to unite the ancient greatness of Charlemagne, and this is what the Third Reich and Nazism was really all about. After the Treaty of Westphalia was signed, the New World became the focus of the Jesuit Vatican interests after the war ended. Through Spain, Hispaniola, which was still loyal to the Vatican, Spanish explorers and Jesuit priests began a massive colonization of the New World, America. Now, we need to explain to you, again, without going into a whole other presentation, the Jesuit bloodlines originated from ancient Babylon through the lineage of Cain, the biblical Cain. And these bloodlines became known as Kenites. In the New Testament, these same bloodlines were referred to as the scribes of the New Testament, the scribes and the Pharisees. The Kenite bloodlines in Austria, Germany, eventually the key bloodlines began a new stronghold, a new foothold, if you will, in the Americas. And they always carried with them a bitter enmity, a bitter hatred towards France and France's power. One such influential Jesuit Jewish family was very much on the side of the Jesuit Vatican forces during the war also moved in 1722 to America. This is the family of a man named Johann Rogenfeder. They sold their Austrian sawmill and wood mill and grist mill and came to America in the year 1722. A few decades later, the family changed their surname to Rockefeller to sound more American. Here we have, folks, the literal birth of an incredible empire with complete loyalty to the Vatican and the Kenite bloodlines. This is the humble home of the grandson, William Avery, also known as Doc Rockefeller. Where is this located? In Richford, upstate New York, where William Avery's son, John D., was born in the year 1839. Let's look at the escapades of this William Avery, this Doc Rockefeller. Here's his picture. He had a number of different nicknames by his neighbors. His best known one is Devil Bill by his neighbors. The record shows that his neighbors in upstate New York were very upset with Devil Bill because he was constantly holding seances and was deep involved in witchcraft. Well, again, he was doing nothing other than what his Jesuit mentors had taught him. Between the years 1810 and 1830 in upstate New York, Rockefeller, with absolutely zero medical training, advertised himself as, quote, Dr. William A. Rockefeller, comma, the celebrated cancer specialist, end quote. And Doc Rockefeller made a small fortune selling a blend of crude oil and alcohol, distilled whiskey, as he labeled it, a, quote, medicinal cure-all tonic. Devil Bill was also a convicted horse thief, folks, rapist and polygamist, having at least 2 wives and 2 separate homes under different names. His posters on his wagon as he went from town to town claimed, quote, all cases of cancer cured, unless too far gone, and they can be greatly benefited, unquote. This is directly from the research book God's Gold, the story of Rockefeller and his times, published in 1932 by Flynn. His son, John D., learned Doc's trade very well. We will now focus on John D. Devil Doc's Bill's original snake oil was called snake oil because of this on its label. It was the label had the name Seneca oil. Doc Rockefeller's, quote, cancer cure had a Seneca Indian head on one side of the bottle, and on the other side of the bottle label, what is known as caduceus symbol. The caduceus symbol in the book of Del Rio, the Jesuit order, the symbol, folks, of magical sorcery. You see here the winged sun god symbol, the 2 entwined serpents around the phallic symbol of the caduceus. Doc's miracle potion sold for $25 a bottle, equivalent to 2 or more months' wages for upstate New York residents, was soon nicknamed snake oil, and the caduceus became eventually the well-known symbol of America's medical profession today. This is the origins, folks, of the AMA symbol of the caduceus. Now, I need to state categorically, do I believe that medical doctors in America today are evil witch doctors peddling snake oil? Of course I don't. They are, for the most part, honest, well-meaning professionals who really do, in my opinion, want to help society and help humans. However, I will also state categorically that it's my opinion that they are naive and ignorant as to their origins. This is a secret that the medical doctors need to understand as well, the origins of their very symbol, the very origins of their trade. This is what I will establish and show you here tonight. Here is young John Dee, and I'll share with you today how this man built his fantastic empire. He didn't build it overnight. Rome was not built overnight either. It was step by step, stone upon stone, layer upon layer, added year by year, day by day, second by second. John Dee was 22 years old in the year 1861 when the Civil War began. And by that time, he'd already amassed quite a significant fortune in Father Doc's business, selling whiskey. He always was able to be an opportunist. He saw a great opportunity to provide his whiskey to the fighting soldiers of both the North and South. And to this end, he actually enlisted a little-known law and paid a substitute to enlist by proxy, thus avoiding the first form of the draft, enlist by proxy in the Union Army, serving in his stead. He basically bought his way out of serving in the Union Army. At the close of the war, I also should say at this point that the primary medicine on the battlefield hospitals of the Civil War was John D. Rockefeller's high-grade medicinal whiskey that was sold by the barrel at greatly inflated prices. War profiteering was the name of this man's game. He sold to both sides. It didn't really matter who bought it as long as it was there. Imagine, if you will, a hospital in the Civil War. Whenever you had a wound that was infected, you just soaked it in whiskey, and if there was an amputation or a surgical procedure performed, the only real anesthetic was John D. Rockefeller's whiskey as an anesthetic. At the close of the Civil War, John Dee was America's first real multi-millionaire. And folks, it all came from selling countless barrels of medicinal whiskey to the surgeons of the Civil War. From New York to California, John Dee then quietly controlled and bought up the vast majority of whiskey distilleries operating in America. And during the Roaring '20s and the Prohibition year era, the Rockefellers were able to consolidate their whiskey and alcohol cartel, and also dealt, folks, in opium dens across the country. Well, let's not forget Doc Rockefeller's original formula. That is simply combining crude, unrefined mineral oil from the earth with distilled alcohol from John's distilleries. Doc taught his son John Dee very well. And John did, in fact, desire to continue blending his crude oil with alcohol to make millions. Here you see on the screen the picture of the first Clarion, Pennsylvania, the first known U.S. oil field, and the dikes, the pumps that were actually bringing the oil to the surface. This was discovered by a man named Colonel Edwin Drake, again in the year 1859. Again, by the time the Civil War ended in the middle 1860s, John Dee used his millions of alcohol profits to form an alliance with Drake, basically buying out his holdings. And by the year 1870, he founded Standard Oil Company. And folks, the rest is literally history. What needs to be established here is exactly how Standard Oil became the undisputed king of oil in the world. John D. Rockefeller formed a secret society with like-minded, Kenites, Jewish/Jesuit brethren. The name of this secret society was called the South Improvement Company, or the SIC. It was the actual forerunner, folks, of the Standard Oil Company. Everybody involved at the highest levels of this company was sworn to the strictest secrecy. Men were warned not even to tell their wives of their activities. J.P. Morgan and the Rothschild Bank already owned the railroads of America, and they were giving illegal rebates to the South Improvement Company. What this did, this had the effects of ruining the small independent oil refineries that were cropping up and forced them to sell to Standard Oil at a tremendous loss or face financial ruin. What good is oil and oil that's refined into kerosene if there's no way to ship it to market? If all the transportation hubs, either the wagon freight companies and or the railroads, which were growing in popularity, were controlled and they weren't allowed to ship non-Standard Oil products to market. This is exactly what happened. Let me draw your attention to this actual... don't ask me how I got a hold of this, just know that I did. This is an actual signed in blood and witnessed in blood of the secret society of the South Improvement Company. I, in the initial A.B., whatever the initials would be, do faithfully promise upon my honor and faith as a gentleman that I will keep secret all transactions which I may have with the corporation known as the South Improvement Company, that should I fail to complete any bargains with the said company, all the preliminary conventions or conversations shall be kept strictly private. And finally, that I will not disclose the price for which I dispose of my product, or any other facts which may in any way bring to light the internal workings or organization of the company. All this do I freely promise. This, folks, is what is known as a monopoly and a cartel of the highest order. Now, the South Improvement Company, again, was the beginning, the forerunner of what became later known as Standard Oil Company. It was chartered in Cleveland, Ohio, and was completely and totally funded by the Rothschild Bank of Ohio, which was known as the Counter-Reformation Bank. The Counter-Reformation Bank, if you know your banking history, was where banks were involved in a centrally controlled, monopolized bank. That was what was attempted to be done from 1860 till it finally was concluded in 1913 with the Federal Reserve Bank. Again, this is all from the pages of the History of Standard Oil Company, the Volume 1 by Ida Tarbell, pages 56 and page 75. I have also here what was known as the Blacklist. People were trying to fight back with the individuals of the President P.H. Watson, President of Southern Improvement Company. These 7 individuals were listed and circulated a blacklist among the independent oil producers, to try and to get public opinion swayed to the burgeoning cartel, the unfair business practices. Let me read to this. This is what this says. These 7 are given as the directors of the Southern Improvement Company. They are refiners or merchants of petroleum, and also blacklisted were the railways and the lines in which they controlled. I notice also down here at the bottom, behold the anaconda in all his hideous deformity. The anaconda was a code word given to the secret cartels that were trying to gain and control American commerce and business practices following the Civil War. There it is, the anaconda. Well, the empire really does begin to take shape after 1870. Other massive oil strikes were made in Ohio, Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, Arkansas, Colorado, Montana, California, and of course the last great find was in the fields of Alaska. again, using his massive whiskey profits and his partner Rothschild, the banking magnate, Rockefeller moved quickly to purchase controlling shares in all of the known world's proven oil fields. And then research began in developing a wide variety of oil-based products of every kind and variety. In 1883, Rockefeller moves his empire to New York City and builds a massive trust or holding company located at 26 Broadway. This is the early picture of the Rockefeller Trust building at 26 Broadway. Notice the pyramid and the 6 levels of ascending pyramid structure there to the top. I find it quite interesting that we found out that Huntsman's building has also likewise 6 floors or 6 levels. Maybe just a coincidence, maybe not. Well, John D. Rockefeller became really the world's first multi-billionaire. As you know the history of oil, oil was manufactured into kerosene at first and used to fuel America's lamps and street lights and lanterns. By 1880, the Rockefeller/Vatican Standard Oil cartel completely dominated the world's kerosene market. The only real rival to Rockefeller was the Russian market, founded, oddly enough, by a Swedish gentleman named Robert Nobel, of the Nobel Prize family, of course. Rapid growth in the Russian oil production had been achieved despite political upheaval that had enveloped the country since the turn of the century, much of which had been centered in the country's oil capital of Baku. Strikes by oil workers had been a regular feature of the protests against the Tsar in 1903 and 1904, and were a major factor in the 1905 Russian Revolution, in which the former Joseph Zukashvili played a significant anti-Tsarist role. As a result of the revolutionary activity he fostered in Baku at that time, Zukashvili was exiled to Siberia. Later, however, with amazing amount of funds, he would reappear and become better known to the world as Joseph Stalin. Joseph Stalin was, in fact, an employee of Rockefeller and Standard Oil. And of course, with the invention and eventual globalization of Ford's automobile, fueled by Rockefeller oil, John D. Rockefeller became the world's second richest man, second only to Amschel Rothschilds. Rothschild was top on the list. Rockefeller was right below him. Let's take a look real quickly at Mr. Stalin. He was, in fact, Rockefeller's prime agent in Russia. The Bolshevik Revolution was funded by oil baron John D. Rockefeller by and through his Standard Oil employee, again, Kenai Jew brethren, such as Joseph Stalin. Rockefeller indeed reaped the whirlwind. Standard Oil tentacles now controlled the Kremlin and Russian communist collectivism. Now let me also explain to you what I mean by a Kenite Jew at this point in the discussion. I don't want it to appear like I'm anti-Semitic at all. The Jewish people, you'll find, have different tribes or different tribal lineages that all claim to be Jewish. You have the tribe of Judah, which historical records show very much was blonde-haired, blue-eyed, red-haired, auburn-haired tribe. The Kenite bloodline were more the black-haired, dark-eyed, swarthy complexion, and they were attached to the tribe of Judah by means of their scribe and Pharisee profession. And this are the very sub-tribe that in the New Testament record conspired to crucify the auburn-haired, blue-eyed Jesus Christ. Now, does that mean that all Hebrew Jews today are Kenites? Absolutely not, any more than saying all American Indians are Apache. That's just not the way it is. different tribes, different bloodlines, different customs, different structures. Unknown to most people in America today, the United States government and members of Congress felt it vitally important to really investigate this anaconda, this cartel called Standard Oil. On May 15th, 1911, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled that the Standard Oil cartel was, quote, a menace to the Republic, and ordered it to be broken up. Quote, for the very safety of the Republic, we, the U.S. Supreme Court, now decree that the dangerous conspiracy must be ended by November 15th, 1911. This is from the book and record John Dee, A Portrait in Oils, page 154. Now, many of you listening to this will say, oh, there is no such thing as a conspiracy. This Truott is a wacky, quacky conspiracy theorist. By the own record, folks, the U.S. Supreme Court made it a law, made by its judicial ruling, that there is a dangerous conspiracy and it must be ended. Rockefeller, with this verdict, was incensed and very angry. He vowed revenge against the United States and promised to his subordinates to use his vast fortune to buy and control the U.S. government, just as he had the Kremlin. He was very big for his britches. He overthrew, through his Bolshevik connections and his brethren, the Tsar himself. One of the great powers of Europe was removed from office by the machinations and the conspiracy, the great conspiracy of John D. Rockefeller and his Keenite brethren. However, the sad truth is the breakup of the Standard Oil monolith didn't really do much. It was ruled to be done, but what happened, there was 37 new companies, and Rockefeller still secretly controlled them all by owning a voting majority of stock in all the new corporations. Thus, Standard Oil became known as Standard Oil of New Jersey, other words Exxon, Standard Oil of New York, Mobil, Standard Oil of Indiana, also known as Amoco, Standard Oil of California, Chevron, Atlantic Refining Arco, etc., etc., etc. And it was, folks, business as usual at 26 Broadway, the headquarters of the giant. Now, I say this at this point, the major economy of Texas is oil, and the tentacles, the coils of the anaconda most definitely control the financial structure of Texas, and of course the Bush family themselves are dependent upon this anaconda for sustenance. Who really decides the policy of Washington, D.C.? Well, it's pretty obvious. 3 years later, in 1914, Rockefeller's agents, in fact, ordered the Kaiser Wilhelm, to invade Belgium, and it did in fact start World War I. Their plan in this whole thing was to keep Germany and England fighting until the U.S. intervened. Herbert Hoover, again, yet another Standard Oil employee, was put in charge of the Belgium Relief Commission, and of course Herbert Hoover became President of the United States, and the Hoover Commission, the new structuring of America after, again, the Great Depression, which was, again, started by and manipulated by the Rockefeller interests. Well, what most people don't understand, too, is because of the events of World War I, the Rockefeller, the Keenite clan secured a very strong foothold in Jerusalem and what is now today known as Israel. In 1914, that's when oil was first discovered in the Middle East. It joined the Caspian Sea oil in breaking the worldwide monopoly of Standard Oil, because the Middle East was controlled largely by Arabian Bedouin. And my goodness, these people, the Bedouin, They realized how potentially powerful the oil was. Rockefeller, like any good cartel managers, realized he couldn't have any competition to his syndicate. Russian oil had been pushed out of the loop by the Russian Revolution, and the only remaining source of foreign oil was the Middle East. This necessitated Standard Oil to control of the area again. It just so happened that the Arabs controlled all of it, and they were on Ignatius Loyola's, the main Jesuit general's, hit list since the 16th century. Here was a chance to control the best oil field in the world and at the same time destroy the Muslim religion. Fact is, you look at the history of who financed World War I, you'll find it was Standard Oil and Rockefeller agents that financed both sides. When it was all over, the British got control of Palestine from the Arabs. The fake Kenite Jews of Germany were invited to go and live there, but few of them took up the offer. Why? Because they had no hereditary connection with the Middle East. None whatsoever. They knew that. World War II changed all of that. Standard Oil worked closely with the company called IG Farben, the big pharmaceutical chemical company in Germany. They, in fact, manufactured the gas for the ovens, the Nazi ovens. When the war was over, whatever surviving Jews in Poland, in the remnants of the unholy Roman Empire, were more than willing to emigrate to Palestine. The State of Israel was officially recognized by the Rockefeller-controlled United Nations on May 14, 1948. The rest is literally history. Here you have a picture of the Rockefeller Museum in Jerusalem. Now you might be asking, well, this is all wonderful history about the state of oil in America. Well, where do we get off the subject of the medical establishment? You have to understand that they're both intertwined, literally like two serpents around a caduceus. It is the serpent of oil and the serpent of medicine that combine on the caduceus. In the year 1910, the medical schools of America were in a sorry state. In fact, many people, just like William Avery, Doc Rockefeller, can go to what's called a diploma mill and buy a medical doctor diploma and go into the medical practice. And that was a very, very common occurrence throughout all America. And who better to understand this plight than the very beginning charlatan himself, William Doc Avery, and his son. And so in 1905, 19 to 1910, Rockefeller began his second arm, his second leg of the serpent twining around the caduceus. He understood the very real need to consolidate and control the complete education curriculum of the training of the medical doctors. Here you see a very rare photograph of the trustees of what is known then as the General Education Board. Now, the first Rockefeller Foundation was called the General Education Board, a non-for-profit education structuring to standardize all the training specifically, first of all, of the medical establishment. Only secondarily did it go into the law schools and control the lawyers of America. But the primary focus here in 1910 and through 1915 was the curriculum of the medical schools in America. Front row, let me go through these. This is at a retreat in Rockland, Maine, taken in July of 1915. The front row from the left, this gentleman here with the mustache, is Edwin A. Alderman, a very famous name in the history of American politics and finance. Also here's Frederick T. Gates, one of the real mastermind and right-hand men of John Rockefeller Sr. To his side is Charles W. Eliot, the former president of none other than Harvard University. Next to him is Harry Pratt Judson, president of the University of Chicago. To his side is Wallace Buttrick, executive officer of the General Education Board. Okay? Second row from left, this gentleman in the back, you see Wycliffe Rose. He was the head of the Rockefeller Public Health Programs, a foundation to standardize the health protocols in hospitals blooming up across America. To his side is Hollis B. Frissell. This gentleman with his face turned away from the camera is the son of John D. Rockefeller. This is John D. Rockefeller Jr. Next to him is E.G. Sage. Next to him is Albert Shaw. And this little gentleman out here, this incredible man, is the name of Abraham Flexner. Abraham Flexner is the author of, the architect of all of the modern medical colleges in America today. This is the man, Mr. Abraham Flexner, a real genius really in how he was able to consolidate and standardize the medical training in America. Okay? In the back row from left is George E. Vincent, president of the Rockefeller Foundation, again a non-for-profit organization. And from him, next to him is Anson Phelps Stokes, Star J. Murphy, and Jerome D. Green. This Rockefeller Foundation, also in addition to the General Education Board at the same time, founded and put millions of dollars into the new organization called the AMA, the American Medical Association, and at the same time, through their various petrochemical research labs, blossomed into controlling all pharmaceutical manufacturing worldwide, including IG Farben. This is where it all began, folks, in 1915, and the pharmaceutical manufacturing began. Now, if you're controlling through petrochemical labs the pharmaceutical or drugs that are manufactured, wouldn't it be just a wonderfully brilliant idea to train all of the medical doctors to primarily do nothing more than peddle or sell your drug products? What a wonderfully brilliant and clever plan. This is exactly what occurred starting in 1915. We need to also just take a few minutes and let you understand the unity that happened in 1916, 1915, the founding of Germany's massive plant known as IG Farben. After 15 years, by the 1930s, Rockefeller's brilliant chemists, these are the best scientific minds really in the world, had in fact unlocked many secrets from the benzene molecular structure of petroleum, the benzene molecule. They found a way to create synthetic rubber even out of oil, and we are no longer dependent on the rubber trees. The tires of the Firestone tires, for instance, can be made out of synthetic oil. And they had in fact secured many, many patents on literally hundreds of unique drugs manufactured by their subsidiary pharmaceutical firms, again, from petroleum. And even to this day, you'll find that the vast majority of pharmaceutical patented drugs on the market today have their origins in the benzene molecule and or the raw opium molecule. I should also make note that the benzene molecular structure is a very neat 5-sided pointed pentagram structure. Is that coincidence? Again, going back to the origins of the Jesuit and who really controls them, I would say it's by design. Now, by the time Hitler came to power, folks, the entire world was now operating on an oil-based economy. And all United States medical schools were training their physicians to literally become peddlers of the benzene-derived drugs from the Standard Oil Company. This is why Rockefeller funded the so-called education foundations and, quote, boards of regents, and completely controlled the medical school curriculum and eventually all public school curriculums by the 1940s. The truth is, any medical college and school not wishing to follow Rockefeller's standardized concurrent protocols were simply denied funding and ceased to exist. The fact is, snake oil at this time now became mainstream. In fact, the caduceus, the snake oil symbol, the two serpents entwined on the phallic symbol, became the actual emblem of the medical foundation. Really a very simple formula, folks. If you are in the oil business, literally trillions of dollars can be made worldwide by supplying armies, navies, and air forces with petroleum-based products and withholding them to their defeat or collapse. Fact. Japan was forced to enter into the alliance with Germany because of the embargo placed upon it by America, and they were withholding oil and petroleum-based products to them. They had no choice but to try and secure their empire by securing the petroleum-based products. In short, control the petroleum resources driving the war machinery, and you control the eventual outcome of any and all wars. Control the outcome of global wars, and guess what? Eventually you can indeed control the world. The second most vital wealth-creating industry in the world is indeed health and wellness. And this is, of course, tied directly to war. I would say to you, health is mankind's carrot, while war is the stick the overlords use to keep the goy, the human cattle, the human sheep, loyal to them and in fear. We're driven today in America we're afraid to become sick. We're afraid of cancer. When the word cancer is dropped upon us in the diagnosis, our heart races with fear and panic. Oh my goodness, what are we going to do? It's based all in fear. I would submit that the son of Doc Rockefeller created the most powerful and successful secret syndicate the world has ever known. Folks, the Rockefeller Syndicate is they. That's who they are. What are some of the other Rockefeller's pet projects we can need to parenthetically make mention of? John D. Rockefeller III, this is him on the right, folks, presents a check in the amount of $8,500,000 to the first Secretary General of the United Nations. This check is used to purchase the land on Manhattan Island, which will house eventually this building here, the United Nations building. This is the bill compliments again of Rockefeller grants, gifts, and loans. Rockefeller also founded and funded the Council on Foreign Relations, the CFR, and the Trilateralist Elite Club. You never become a member of the CFR without first passing the eye of the Rockefeller Foundation. Also, let's look at something else many people don't understand. David and Nelson were called the Twin Towers of New York. Why? The Twin Towers themselves, the World Trade Center towers, were affectionately nicknamed David and Nelson. Rockefeller, because why? David and Nelson were the driving force behind their construction. And again, immediately after the very public planned demolition of the towers on September 11th of 2001, the Rockefeller Syndicate controlled Pentagon, in fact, invaded Afghanistan and set up U.S. bases by the Caspian Sea. Again, let me emphasize clearly, Caspian Sea and Iraqi oil reserves supplying France were the only solid competition to Standard Oil since 1890. And completely under the disguise of the War on Terror, the cartel could now increase their prices. Folks, the only thing that has kept gasoline under $3 a gallon since the 80s was the Caspian Sea oil and Iraq. Regardless of what you think or may believe about Saddam Hussein undercut Rockefeller's OPEC at every turn and sold in the black market millions and millions of barrels and kept the price low. The War on Terror just merely was designed to eliminate the cartel's main competition and wild card. Caspian Sea competition was the subject of many top-level conferences at the headquarters of the Trust at 26 Broadway, New York. One of the methods of meeting the threat was price-cutting sweet crude, direct quote from the book Rockefeller Billions, page 165. This picture here shows David and Nelson on Wall Street during Nelson's 1970 race for governor of New York State. And here on the right you see Governor Nelson Rockefeller, this is him on the left, with Mayor John Lindsay inspecting the model of the Twin Towers at its groundbreaking and construction. Fact, David Rockefeller financed the construction of the World Trade Center and, surprise, surprise, even provided the insurance on the buildings themselves. What's up, Doc Rockefeller? The truth is that the syndicate's cost of goods sold since 1883 includes 75 million war dead from 2 global wars and police actions, plus the millions of innocents who die each year from cancer and other diseases that could be helped immensely by honest nutrition-based therapies and honest public education on the area of nutrition. I think the U.S. Supreme Court was absolutely correct when they said this is the most dangerous cartel, a most dangerous conspiracy that must be broken up. Sadly, after that landmark event, Rockefeller went to work and began to really produce politicians in his back pocket. And today, most people don't even have a clue that this is fact and history. But it is truth, it is historical, and it is valid. Like Caspian Sea oil, the only real competition to Rockefeller's medical mafia, as I prefer to call him, is mineral-based nutrition and oxygen/hydration therapies. Why is this a threat? Because it is natural. It is the building blocks of all health and wellness. These competitive threats of naturopathy must be dealt with by the syndicate's enforcers and propaganda ministers. In other words, the Food and Drug Administration and the Rockefeller-controlled mass media outlets. They work together. Let me share with you some other facts that many of you may know in your heart to be true, but you don't have any conclusive proof of. This is a portion of the presentation I want to call Death by Medicine. According to researcher Gary Null, PhD, the number of people in America experiencing adverse reactions to prescribed drugs while hospitalized is a whopping 2.2 million people across America. This is in the year 2002, folks. Also, a number of unnecessary antibiotics prescribed for viral infections in our children and adults. Annually, $20 million. Do you realize antibiotics are meant to to go against bacterial infections and not viral infections. The vast majority of colds and flus are viruses, and for heaven's sakes, antibiotics do not touch them at all. 3, the number of unnecessary medical and surgical procedures performed annually. 7.5 million unnecessary medical and surgical procedures. And of course, look at this one, the number of unnecessary hospitalizations annually. 8.9 million unnecessary hospitalizations. But the biggest problem of death by medicine is literally death. Is death a problem? Clearly, the single most stunning statistic in Dr. Null's report, however, is the total number of deaths caused by conventional medicine errors and or mistakes in the United States. That's an astounding 783,936 fatalities reported during 2001. According to this report, the American medical system is now the leading cause of death and injury in the U.S., overtaking heart disease and cancer itself. And we are asked, as we the people, to believe there is not a problem here. Again, why is this grim report being ignored by the mainstream media? Folks, it's little wonder that malpractice insurance rates are forcing many physicians in America into early retirement. I would submit that a new perspective, a new paradigm is in fact needed. Let's again put this problem into perspective if we can. The statistics I just quoted equate to over 15,000 American deaths every week of every year. In other words, the equivalent of 5 World Trade Center attacks death tolls each and every work week in America. If even 1/100th of the attention the media gave to the 9/11 attacks were focused on this very real problem, perhaps meaningful reforms could be initiated. Of course, foreign, quote, terrorist attacks are much more exciting to report and sensationalized to the American media than John Q. Public's death by medical error. Can this just be an accident? Here are some very real nutritional solutions I would like to offer to you. Again, quoting Nobel laureate Linus Pauling, he declared this sobering truth: you can trace every sickness, every disease, and every ailment ultimately to a mineral deficiency. Why is this? Simply because the minerals compose the compound. When they combine to form compounds, they're called vital minerals, or the acronym vitamin comes from the vital minerals. Vital mineral supplementation may be helpful in controlling many, if not all, dread diseases. Nutritional or mineral deficiencies then equal disease. As I mentioned earlier, just as scurvy was found to be caused by a vitamin C deficiency, so has the dread disease of cancer been linked to a vitamin B17 deficiency. Did you know, folks, that the seed, or the grain seed millet, is extremely high in vitamin B17, and it was replaced by wheat as America's staple grain in the early 1950s. Grain has virtually no B17, or what's called nitrilosides, in its content. Ever since wheat replaced millet, cancer has skyrocketed ever since in America, and ever more sophisticated versions of Doc Rockefeller's snake oil have been sold in very, very high profits. Well, I got to also mention right here that if you ask any oncologist or medical specialist in this field, they will tell you real quickly that vitamin B17 therapy is quackery to consensus medicine. Let me share with you, this is the most commonly reported, quote, study on B17, also known as amygdalin in the text. This supposed report was published in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1982. In the treatment of human cancer, it was done by these authors, Mortel, Fleming, Rubin, and others. Here is the abstract that is quoted as gospel in most cancer institutes and oncologists that do their supposed research. They just take the word of the Rockefeller-trained medical professionals without really looking deeply if this is really true. And let me share with you the abstract. Quote, 178 patients with cancer were treated with amygdalin B17 plus a metabolic therapy program consisting of diet, enzymes, and vitamins. The great majority of these patients were in good general condition before treatment. None was totally disabled or in pre-terminal condition. 1/3 had not received any previous chemotherapy. The pharmaceutical preparations of amygdalin, the dosage, and the schedule were representative of past and present Laetrile practice. By the way, Laetrile is another name for amygdalin. It's the standardized B17. No substantive benefit was observed in terms of cure, improvement or stabilization of cancer, improvement of symptoms related to cancer, or extension of lifespan. Boy, that's pretty incredibly damning, isn't it? The hazards of amygdalin therapy were evidenced in several patients by symptoms of cyanide toxicity or by blood cyanide levels approaching the lethal range. Patients exposed to this agent should be instructed about the danger of cyanide poisoning, and their blood cyanide levels should be carefully monitored. Amygdalin, parentheses Laetrile or B17, is a toxic drug that is not effective as a cancer treatment, end quote. I need to dissect this for you so that you will understand the other side of the quack, the call to nutrition. Vitamin B17, as I already stated, is naturally found in a couple of really a number of items, key of which is the grain millet. It's also found in the seeds of the Rosacea family of plants. Specifically, it's very high in apricot kernels, peach kernels, plum kernels, seeds of the apple and pear. Can you get cyanide toxicity poisoning from eating apricot pits, for instance? Of course you can. If you eat a tubful, if you eat more than you would normally eat in apricots in a setting, you can get sick. But you can also do the same thing with drinking too much water. You can actually cause a poisonous condition by drinking gallons of water in one sitting. So to say that cyanide levels by taking B17 is equivalent to saying if you drink water, it's toxic. Do not drink water. It's very much the same rationale. Here is exactly how B17 operates. The B17 molecule is composed of 4 parts. There are 2 parts of glucose, prime sugar, combined with a molecule of benzaldehyde, and combined with a molecule of cyanide. When benzaldehyde and cyanide are bound to glucose, the healthy cell digests it as a nutrient. I give you the example of sodium and chloride. Separately, sodium and chloride are extremely poisonous and toxic to the human cell. However, combined together, they form sodium chloride or salt, and they become a very important health-producing nutrient if not chemically altered. The same is true with vitamin B17. When a cancer cell forms in the body, there is a amino acid present called beta-glucosidase. This amino acid chain dissolves the molecular bonding of the glucose molecule. The benzaldehyde and cyanide are released and absorbed into the cancer cell at only the cancer cell, causing death, natural selection death of the cancer cell, and at the same time given nutrition and support to the healthy cells. This research was quantified and proven to my satisfaction by the groundbreaking work of a biochemist named Dr. Ernest Krebs in the 1950s. With relief and joy, he released this to the world. Clearly, the nutritional link to the mechanisms of all cancers, all 217 plus known forms of virulent cancers, now has been understood by Dr. Krebs' work. Immediately, the medical establishment of the Rockefeller swung into full force to discredit Dr. Krebs, discredit this incredible breakthrough, and more importantly, to keep it away from the American public. And this is exactly what has happened, folks. Millions and millions of people have died since 1955 from cancer, and the actual foundational nutritional cure is in the record. It's in the medical record. That is criminal and unforgivable to me. Speaking also of this abstract, the Rockefeller Foundation, the American Medical Association, the New England Journal of Medicine, do not ever show the actual test results nor the methodology of the scientific model. They only show the abstract written here. They do not mention the over 70,000 incredible cancer success stories utilizing B17 in its modality of treatment. At this point, I also need to explain to you the role the minerals play. Specific minerals work with the bloodstream and the pancreatic enzyme structures to create a very important cancer-protecting enzyme called trypsin. Trypsin has to be formed by the synthesis of minerals into the bloodstream. Without minerals in the diet, without minerals being supplemented, the enzyme trypsin is oftentimes, the levels are very low. Also, trypsin is used by the body to digest the meat proteins of red meats, really all meats, but primarily red meats. So the more red meat, the more steak and potatoes the person eats without raw minerals added to the mix, the lower the trypsin levels, the more at risk the individual is to develop a cancer, to become the 1 in 2 male statistic or the 1 in 3 female statistic that I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. Folks, I want to just declare to you there is an intolerable double standard in America today. The Food and Drug Administration enforcers, again, Food and Drug Administration founded and financed in the very beginning by the Rockefeller structure. These enforcers seek to constantly warn the American consumer against, quote, fraudulent and nutritional quackery like Truott and other nutritionists that are out telling the story. Yet they turn a blind eye to public fluoridation of drinking water. Folks, sodium fluoride is highly toxic rat poison. And it's placed in our water and our toothpaste, and nobody in the FDA is batting an eye over this toxic substance. Chemists like Armand Hammer, a protege, partner with John D. Rockefeller in the formation of the Soviet Union, and his protege, yes, his protege, John Huntsman Sr. They have united with Rockefeller interests to keep this charade intact. with their false hope. Their false hope looking for a chemical cure that they can make trillions off of. Folks, it's all a scam. The cure is in the record. It's there. It's available. And they know the answers and have already been identified and kept in the record. I ask you, who are the real quacks and charlatans in the health insurance industry, the health services industry? Who are the real quacks and who are the real charlatans? I ask also, when will the American people say enough already and disenfranchise this syndicate? And how can you do it? Through knowledge and sharing the truth. In the Old Testament, the prophet Hosea said simply, "My people are perished, they're destroyed for lack